If you've watched the channel in the past, you might have seen my Unique Melody Mest Mark II video, and that was an IEM that I came in wanting to like, but really didn't in the end. I found it to be a bit incoherent, it didn't kind of gel in the way that I wanted it to, and so I came into this review kind of hoping that Unique Melody were going to redeem themselves with me, and that maybe I could redeem myself with them by giving them a good review if the product earned it. And then when I read the marketing materials on the website, I was a little bit nervous. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. And today we're taking a look at the Unique Melody Multiverse Mentor. This is a $4,500 US IEM from Unique Melody. It uses some fascinating technologies, and I want to start off by saying a huge thanks to long-term viewer Tommy for sending these over.
I don't wanna waste it on anybody. Take it with anybody but you. I don't wanna waste it on anybody. Take it with anybody but you.
The Multiverse Mentors use a fascinating combination of balanced armatures and a single bone conduction driver, that's per side. And so in each side you're getting 12 balanced armatures and a piezoelectric driver to hopefully produce a fantastic full range sound. But the other things to mention is that combination of drivers gives us a 22 ohm, 114 decibel sensitivity earphone, making them very easy to drive from pretty much anything. Obviously quality is still important, but they don't need much power. And then I also want to talk about some of the marketing on the Unique Melody website, because I have to say I'm not impressed with the marketing side of things. They use a lot of buzzwords on the page about the Multiverse Mentor, but it doesn't really tell you what it's doing. Specifically, they talk about a frequency shift piezoelectric driver for the bone conduction driver. They separately talk about frequency shift technology, which has got something to do with changing the resonance of the housing of these. But it doesn't really tell you what that's meant to translate to, which frequencies it influences, or how it influences it. And so I didn't know going into this if it was just a whole lot of buzzwords. If you've watched the channel in the past, you might have seen my Unique Melody Mest Mark II video, and that was an IEM that I came in wanting to like, but really didn't in the end. I found it to be a bit incoherent, it didn't kind of gel in the way that I wanted it to, and so I have to admit that I went from being keen to revisit Unique Melody, my first ever customs were with Unique Melody, and I was very excited to come back around with the Mest Mark II. And so I came into this review kind of hoping that Unique Melody were going to redeem themselves with me, and that maybe I could redeem myself with them by giving them a good review if the product earned it. And then when I read the marketing materials on the website, I was a little bit nervous. A couple of other things to mention in terms of the specs before I do get into how they look and feel and sound, is that they come with a cable that's a combination of copper and silver-plated copper. And that cable comes from a company called THIEAUDIO, based I think from memory in Hong Kong, and it's a lovely, lovely cable. It's finished, in this case at least, in a 4.4mm termination. It's a beautiful braided cable with a fabric cover, or sleeving I should say, and it's just really a joy to use. It's a nice thickness but not too thick, it sits nicely, it's really enjoyable. It's got 2-pin connectors into the earphones themselves, and then speaking of the earphones, these are beautiful. The shells of these are made of carbon fibre in the base of them. So the base, the bit that actually sits closest to the ear. And then there's actually a ceramic plate on top of it with a Banksia seed faceplate. So it's a really interesting design, it's a very unusual design, and I really like it. Unique Melody have also chosen to give you a screw-on, screw-off filter system, not to tune the earphones, but just if you do ever need to replace a filter, it's very easy to do it. Some companies just give you the filter mesh and then you've got to kind of fiddle around with tweezers. This is a very simple way to do it. And I think when you're spending $4,500 US on a pair of earphones, little things like that are nice. And so these earphones looked the part, they certainly feel the part, but as I said before, I was a little bit concerned about the marketing. I was really worried that I was about to have another experience like the Mest Mark II, and that everything on the website was just talk, that it wasn't going to stack up to an organic, natural listening experience. Before I get to the sound quality, the one last thing I want to mention is that in the box, you get yourself some really nice tips. There's some Asler tips, there's some tips that are branded Unique Melody that are just a nice silicone tip. And then on top of that, you also get this case, which is quite bulky, but it also gives you space to actually separate the earphones on the inside. It's got a little divider in it. And that means that your precious earphones aren't going to be banging together. The actual shells won't be banging together within your bag when you're traveling around, when you're moving the case around. It's going to keep the earphones safe. And that's, again, a nice thing, I think. I would have liked to see a slightly more compact case perhaps, but some of you will prefer the extra space and not putting too much strain on the cable, the different bends in the cable, etc. That's where the bigger cases can be beneficial. But no doubt what you really want to know, and what I was really interested in, is how do they sound? Are they an improvement on something like the Mest Mark II that I didn't like so much? And so let's jump into sound quality now. If you're trying to work out what piece of gear you should buy next, then the Passion for Sounds Recommends database might be helpful for you. In the description box of every single video, just down here, you'll find the Passion for Sounds Recommends section. If you click on this link, it'll take you through to the Passion for Sounds Recommends Airtable database. What you'll see in here is every single product that I've ever reviewed and recommend, in some cases products that I own but maybe haven't reviewed but recommend. And then once you're in here, you can use the filter button up here to decide to filter by things like whether or not the product type is for a headphone, for example. So maybe you're looking for a headphone. Filter it by that and you can now see every headphone I recommend. You can sort it by price, which is the default sorting, or any other sorting method that you want. And then once you've got the list of products you're looking for, you've got the links to the reviews of the products, and then also purchasing links for global retailers and also regional retailers for the US, Australia, Canada, and the UK. So feel free to play around with this, sort it, filter it however you want to. It won't affect what anybody else sees, and you can hopefully find just the right products for you. I hope this is helpful, and now let's get back to the review. Starting off as I always do at the top, and talking about the treble, these produce a beautiful extended treble, but a very smooth, clean treble. That also means that the sense of transience and attack is very good, but not overly aggressive at all. I do feel like the overall treble balance is a little bit enhanced, so they push a little bit of extra treble energy at you, but it's done fairly tastefully. That then translates into mid-range and vocals that have got a good sense of texture, but still a good sense of body as well. Sometimes when we get that extra treble energy, it throws the tonality of mid-range off, but there's enough body and presence in the mid-range from the Multiverse Mentors that it certainly balances off the treble well. Bass weight comes across as being impressive, but not enhanced. It doesn't feel like it's been boosted at all, and indeed the graphs do bear that out, but they've got a nice sense of body to it. Some balanced armatures can be a bit too fast in the bass, and you lose the sense of presence and body as a result, but they've done some good work here at giving it a nice natural sense of decay. And what that means, decay is the speed at which the sounds disappear, and what that means is in the case of the Multiverse Mentor, the bass does have a sense of presence, body, depth even, and I don't mean depth in terms of extension, but depth in terms of within the soundstage, within even the time domain. It's got a good sense of weight, it doesn't feel disembodied at all. Having said that, the extension is a little bit iffy. The bass feels like it goes deep because it's got a good sense of weight to it, but in reality when you listen to a track that's meant to go really deep, they do roll off fairly steeply. Now I don't know if the graphs that I'm showing you are entirely indicative of what you hear with these. I was actually surprised when I went and did the measurements that they rolled off as much as they did, and I'm wondering if the piezoelectric bone conduction driver maybe gives you a little bit more foundation in the bass that's not showing up in the measurements. So take these measurements with a grain of salt. They're pretty close to what I'm hearing, but I did feel like the extension probably went just a little bit deeper than it looks. And so overall, the tonality of these is what I would describe as being very natural, very true to life, with just a little bit of extra treble emphasis at times. As you'd expect from both a high-end IEM and also a multi-balanced armature IEM, the detail retrieval and resolution from these is very, very good. But as I've already alluded to, the speed, the overall sense of speed and kind of the sharpness of the sound from these is not as quick as you expect from some balanced armature units. And I think that's great because it enhances their sense of naturality, but it does mean that they don't come across as this absolute kind of incisive tool into the music. If you're looking for an IEM that's going to show you every last little sound at the expense sometimes of naturality, then these don't stack up against something like the Visioneers EXT that I reviewed recently. They're a different sound to that. On the other hand, they probably do stack up quite favourably with something like the Visioneers Phonics or Phoenix. And so do recognise that about these, they're not a super fast, super revealing IEM, but they're wonderfully natural, wonderfully honest about the music. They're not overly coloured, they've got that little bit of a treble sparkle as I said, but they're overall quite smooth and quite natural in their delivery. And indeed some might find them a little bit too smooth and natural depending on your taste as I've just alluded to. I found the soundstage to be very good for an IEM, it goes a little bit beyond the ears, and it's got a good sense of depth as well, but the depth kind of has a sense of height to it as well. So what I was finding was that sounds in the soundstage would be off to the sides, slightly beyond the ears, and then they'd extend forwards and up within the soundstage. So there's a slight sense of unnaturality to it if you're really paying attention, But if you're just enjoying the music, what it means is you're getting enough sense of layering and depth to make everything sound real, to give it a sense of space in the soundstage, so nothing's ever congested, and I thoroughly enjoyed them in that context. Something that helps all of that is that the imaging of sounds, the focus of each individual sound is fantastic, and it produces one of those sound stages that I sometimes talk about as though you can almost wander through it. If you close your eyes while you're listening to the music, you can hear where each individual sound is and you can explore it in your mind. And I love that when you get that in an IEM. And so what all of this translates to is that generally speaking, these are an IEM that's going to be brilliant for everything. They perform wonderfully with classical, they're great with rock and other genres that need a bit of a groove and a bit of a rhythm and bass to them. As I said, the bass extension isn't massive, so if you're into EDM and other genres that need deep bass, they might start to fall short there. But for everything else I tried, they have the ability to groove and rock, but also to give you detail and clarity and precision. And so that inevitably leads us to the question of whether they're worth the $4,500 price tag. That's a lot of money for IEMs. I've had other reviews in recent times, like the aforementioned Visioneers reviews, and so I was curious to see if these fell into the same boat. The first comparison for me was the recently reviewed THIEAUDIO Prestige, and listening to Sister Moon by Herbie Hancock and Sting, the Multiverse Mentors delivered a lovely sense of richness and smoothness, but still clarity as well. The overall delivery and presentation is fairly intimate. There are a couple of sounds off, mostly to the right-hand side, that were well spaced, but everything else is pretty intimate in this recording, and that was what was delivered by the Multiverse Mentor. But then when I went over to the Prestige, I immediately noticed that it was more full in the bass. And the Prestige does have a little bit of a lift, actually a couple of kind of lifts through its mid-range and bass, and you could definitely hear that coming out. The Prestige is also a bit crisper in the top end. It got a little bit sizzly at times for me. And what I mean by that is that some of the sibilants and some of the higher pitched sounds, those were just a bit more aggressive from the Prestige. And it kind of showed me how well the Multiverse Mentor is balancing clarity and smoothness. I'm not going to say one's better or worse, but they're different, and I do like what the Multiverse Mentor does. The Multiverse Mentor comes across a little bit thicker overall, or maybe richer is a better term, but it's also what makes them a little bit more natural as well. And ultimately, I feel like everything's just better balanced from the Multiverse Mentors. I mean that tonally speaking. Everything feels natural, it feels well placed. It actually makes the Prestige sound a little bit uneven in its tonality. Not that the Prestige sounds bad, but I think the Multiverse Mentor just sounds clearly better in that regard. And so if you were going to buy something like the Multiverse Mentor over, say, the Prestige, what you're getting is an incremental increase in refinement and tonal balance. But then the question comes in whether it's worth nearly $3,000 more, I think it is. So it's a big jump up for what I would describe as an incremental, couple of steps increase. But the question of value does remain. So let's move on and look at some other IEMs and see where they stack up there. The next comparison was with the Sennheiser IE900s. I keep coming back to these because their single dynamic driver is just so perfectly coherent. I like their tonality. They're not perfect, but I enjoy them. And so listening to Sweet Maxine by the Doobie Brothers, I compared these two side by side, starting with the Multiverse Mentor, and it sounds fantastic. There's a lovely sense of attack and clarity and articulation. The separation of sounds is fantastic too, and this isn't a fantastic recording, but it was sounding really good. The bass had a nice sense of impact and drive, this track's got a bit of rhythm in it, and the Multiverse Mentor picked that up well. And then the other thing I noticed was the piano. The sense of attack on the piano was really strong, really clear, really percussive. Flipping over then to the IE900, and the first thing I noticed was that there was less sense of resonance from the piano. The sound is definitely drier from the IE900. The bass gave me a little bit less sense of impact from the IE900, but it showed me that extra extension that is where the Multiverse Mentor's bass does start to fall short just a little bit. So if you are somebody that likes deep bass, that's an area that these definitely do fall short compared to something like the IE900, for instance. But on the other hand, the IE900 brings more emphasis in the treble, and that can make them a little bit fatiguing sometimes, whereas the Multiverse Mentor was just wonderfully enjoyable through everything. I feel like the staging was fantastic on both sets, and once again, what it really came down to was that the tonal balance for me was better on the Multiverse Mentor, the bass extension was better on the IE900s, but the sense of overall smoothness and clarity and tonal balance had the Multiverse Mentor being the slightly more enjoyable unit for me, so long as I wasn't looking for tracks, particularly with bass extension. And so that brought me to one final test, and this was with the Shure KSE 1200. These are my go-to reference IEM. I absolutely adore them. They're an electrostatic IEM, which means you have to carry an extra energizer box with them. But they're an IEM that for me, if you're happy to use the extra energizer box, they're about as good as it gets for the money. Listening to Sail to the Moon by Radiohead, and what I heard as I switched between these two was that they've got an overall similar sound, But the KSE 1200 has a sense of delicacy to its sound, whereas there's a sense of richness from the Multiverse Mentor, and neither is better or worse, they're just different, but definitely similar. The Multiverse Mentor is just smooth and clean again, and I specifically wanted to flag that it is smooth, but it is clean. There's no lack of clarity, no lack of definition or resolution, but it's delivered so smoothly. It's very easy to listen to, but not at all smoothed off. The cymbals, the guitar, and the sense of kind of grit in this recording comes through on the Multiverse Mentor, but it's never aggressive or harsh either. The vocal is once again beautifully separated by the Multiverse Mentor, but I would say that when I went over to the KSE 1200, it was separated even better. The KSE 1200 was also a bit crisper on sounds like the cymbals, and that meant that the sound from the KSE 1200s came across a little bit more delicate and a bit more articulate, but it's not to say that it was clearly better. Where the Shures fell flat a little bit compared to these was they lack the weight in the sound. And so as I said before, the way the Multiverse Mentor has been tuned gives it this lovely sense of presence and weight and body, and I don't feel like the KSE 1200s can hold up quite as well in that regard. And so for me it was quite an interesting comparison. I think tonally these are very similar sounding units, but what changes between them is that the extra speed of the KSE 1200 electrostatic drivers means that they've got that sense of articulation and delicacy and precision, but without the presence and weight behind it. On the other hand, when you go to the Multiverse Mentor, you do lose a tiny sense of clarity and crispness compared to the KSE 1200, but what you're getting in return is that presence and body in the sound. And so to bring this to a close, I'm really pleased to say that I absolutely adored my time with the Multiverse Mentor. It's reaffirmed my faith in both the piezoelectric bone conduction drivers and also Unique Melody and their ability to make wonderful, wonderful IEMs. And so I think they're a fantastic sounding unit. I think anyone out there that's got them is no doubt going to be loving every second with them. But it does still leave me questioning just a little bit the price tag attached to them. And this is a really tough one. This is going to be a personal preference thing. What I've found over and over again lately is that when you get to the level of things like the IE900, the THIEAUDIO Prestige, and the KSE 1200 from Shure, once you hit that point, it's very hard to get a major shift, a major improvement in sound quality. And so there is no doubt in my mind that the Multiverse Mentor offers clear benefits over any of the other IEMs that I've talked about here, but it's still got its own drawbacks. So it's not like you're getting perfection and you're getting improvements across the board. You're getting strengths here, but still weaknesses too. The weaknesses are pretty minor unless you want lots and lots of bass extension, but it does still draw the question from me as to whether it's worth spending sometimes $3,000 more to get this level of improvement. It is an improvement, I just don't know if it's $3,000 worth of improvement. But having said that, if you've got the money available and you're looking for an earphone that's going to deliver you an amazing listening experience with a very smooth, very clean sound that's still detailed and articulate, then I don't think you can really go wrong with the Multiverse Mentor. Now, I'm not sure looking at the website if this is an ongoing unit. It was sold out at the time that I did my research, so I don't know if it's still available. But what it means is it gives me a lot of comfort in generally recommending whatever Unique Melody bring out next in their Mentor range. It's got a level of performance that I think is fantastic, and I'd absolutely comfortably buy it if you're in a position with the budget. And so I want to say thanks again to Tommy for giving me the chance to try these and to reignite my enjoyment of Unique Melody IEMs. And I hope you found the video useful, helpful, and informative. If you have, as always, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button, and consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell if you haven't already. But for now, let me leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.